A new dawn in the void. The year was 2147 AD, and Earth had just discovered its place among the stars. Humanity, still young and relatively primitive compared to the advanced alien species of the Galactic Commonwealth, struggled to establish itself. They were seen by most as fragile beings, clinging to their home planet and the few colonies they had managed to set up. But that perception was about to change. While most alien races dismissed humans, a few took an interest in their peculiar resilience. The Alani, a race that shared similar physical traits with humans but lived an arboreal lifestyle, felt an inexplicable kinship with these newcomers. They saw humanity's persistence, their willingness to explore the unknown despite dangers, as a mirror of their own ancient past. Secretly, they began observing humans closely, watching with curiosity as they embarked on their journey into the great expanse of space. Humanity was bold, often reckless, venturing into areas no other species dared to tread. Whether it was traversing dangerous stellar nurseries or cataloging alien microbes on desolate worlds, humans showed no fear. Their curiosity was limitless, driving them to pick stars at random, eager to uncover the mysteries of the universe. They weren't the largest or the most powerful species, but their ingenuity made them stand out. When the Alani finally initiated first contact, they were met with open arms. Humans welcomed the Alani as friends and allies, beginning a relationship that would shape the future of both species. The Alani's ambassadors shared stories of humans' courage and bravery, none more poignant than the tale of a doomed Xenon ship filled with younglings caught in a subspace rift. Humans, without hesitation, sent ship after ship to rescue the alien younglings. It didn't matter that they were outmatched or that many of their ships were destroyed in the process. They simply wouldn't stop trying. Over 800 human lives were lost in the rescue mission, but they saved 25 Xenon children. The Alani ambassador's father watched these events unfold, and from that day forward, the Alani became staunch supporters of humanity. Despite humanity's growing reputation, the Galactic Commonwealth remained indifferent, refusing to recognize the Human Republic as a full member. The humans, however, were unbothered. They continued to explore, trade, and expand their reach into the stars, quietly becoming a force to be reckoned with. The insectoid threat looms. By the year 2172 AD, the Galactic Commonwealth had grown accustomed to the cycle of war and peace that came with the insectoid empire. These terrifying beings, who communicated only through the harsh simplicity of give, leave, were a hive mind, an interconnected network of trillions of wasp-like creatures with a singular focus: expand, devour, and conquer. The Commonwealth had survived these insectoid incursions before. Each time, the hive would appear, strike swiftly, seize uninhabitable planets, and then retreat. Diplomacy had proven impossible. The hive had no interest in negotiations or alliances. Their view of the galaxy was radically different from any other species. They cared nothing for individuality, identity, or diplomacy. All they understood was growth and survival, and they achieved this by consuming resources and obliterating any who stood in their way. For centuries, the Commonwealth had managed these threats by withdrawing. The insectoids typically targeted planets that were undesirable to most species. Barren, inhospitable worlds were of no interest to the Commonwealth, so they simply evacuated, letting the insectoids take what they wanted. It was a cold, calculated form of survival. Why fight an enemy over territory that held no value to them? But this time was different. Without warning, the insectoids launched a full-scale invasion, not of the barren outskirts of the galaxy, but into the very heart of Commonwealth space. The insectoid empire, after centuries of relative dormancy, unleashed a wave of destruction unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Entire fleets of insectoid warships, each more terrifying than the last, descended upon the Commonwealth with a singular mission: annihilation. The Commonwealth, caught off guard, was unprepared for the ferocity of the assault. Its fleet, vast but scattered, struggled to respond in time. The insectoid ships, sleek, dark, and bristling with weaponry, swept through the outer sectors, leaving nothing but devastation in their wake. Entire planets, some home to billions of lives, were wiped clean in mere hours, their atmospheres burned away by the insectoid hive ships. 8 member species of the Commonwealth were completely eradicated in the first week alone. The Commonwealth's leaders convened in desperation, scrambling to assemble their scattered forces and mount a defense, but they knew they were outmatched. The insectoids' technology was advanced, and their hive mind allowed them to coordinate their fleets with terrifying precision. Meanwhile, the Commonwealth's various species, each with their own fleets and technologies, struggled to unify under a single command. The insectoid ships, particularly their hive ships, were unlike anything the Commonwealth had faced before. Massive, towering structures that dwarfed even the largest of the Commonwealth's warships, these hive ships were the heart of the insectoid fleet. They carried thousands of individual insectoid warriors and could release swarms of smaller attack ships, overwhelming anything in their path. And when the insectoids grew tired of a planet, they simply glassed it, releasing a barrage of energy that turned the surface into a lifeless. As the insectoid threat grew, the Commonwealth's fleets were decimated. The outer sectors had been rendered lifeless, their planets reduced to ash. Billions were dead, and the Commonwealth had lost half of its fleet in the first month of the invasion. Hope was slipping away. But there was one glimmer of light in the darkness: humanity. Though not officially part of the Commonwealth, humans had proven themselves capable and resourceful over the years. Their early spacefaring days had been filled with trial and error, loss and triumph. Yet through it all, they had grown stronger. They had learned, adapted, and evolved into a formidable force in the galaxy, even if the rest of the Commonwealth had yet to fully recognize it. As news of the insectoid onslaught reached Earth, the Human Republic immediately convened its own council. The president of the Human Republic, a pragmatic leader named Laura Castillo, knew that humanity could not sit idly by. The insectoids were not the kind of enemy to be reasoned with, nor were they likely to stop with the Commonwealth. If left unchecked, the insectoid empire would eventually turn its gaze toward human space, and if that happened, humanity would be just as vulnerable as the Commonwealth. President Castillo made a bold decision. Without waiting for an official invitation from the Commonwealth, she sent a subspace message to their council, offering humanity's aid in the fight against the insectoids. Along with the message came a fully signed treaty of alliance and mutual defense pact, bypassing all the bureaucracy and diplomatic wrangling that usually slowed such processes. The Commonwealth was hesitant. Humans were still considered a middle power, their technology impressive, but not quite on par with the more advanced species of the Commonwealth. Could their relatively small fleet make a difference against the insectoid juggernaut? The Commonwealth leadership debated furiously, uncertain of whether to accept the humans' offer. But the humans didn't wait for a reply. Even as the Commonwealth Council deliberated, humanity began to mobilize. Fleets of human ships, scout vessels, battleships, and cargo freighters retrofitted for combat rallied at the edge of human space, ready to join the fight. The Alani and the Zenin, humanity's closest allies, immediately pledged their support, sending their own fleets to reinforce the human effort. Despite their reservations, the Commonwealth had no choice but to accept humanity's help. Their fleets were shattered, and without reinforcements, the insectoids would continue to rampage unchecked. The Council voted, albeit reluctantly, to accept humanity's alliance, and soon human ships were flooding into Commonwealth space. What the Commonwealth hadn't anticipated was how quickly and effectively humanity would adapt to the situation. Unlike the massive, lumbering battleships of the Commonwealth, human ships were smaller and more agile. Their fleet commanders, many of whom had backgrounds in science and exploration, employed unconventional tactics. Rather than engaging the insectoid ships in head-to-head battles, the humans used hit-and-run tactics, ambushes, and guerrilla-style warfare. They struck quickly, targeting the insectoid supply lines and outposts, then vanishing into the depths of space before the insectoids could mount a counterattack. Humanity also brought something to the table that the insectoids had never faced before: unpredictability. The insectoid hive mind, while powerful, was rigid. They were excellent at overwhelming their enemies with sheer numbers and brute force, but they struggled when faced with an enemy that didn't follow the same patterns. Humans, with their penchant for creativity and improvisation, exploited this weakness. They used their smaller ships to sow chaos within the insectoid ranks, forcing them to spread their forces thin and react to threats on multiple fronts. One of humanity's greatest assets was their relentless spirit. No matter how many ships they lost, they kept fighting. It was this tenacity that had first impressed the Alani, and now it was on full display for the entire Commonwealth to see. Human pilots, engineers, and soldiers worked around the clock, pushing themselves to their limits. They modified their ships on the fly, adapting to the insectoid threat faster than any other species had ever managed. As the insectoid fleet continued its relentless advance, the humans and their allies set a daring plan into motion. They knew that to truly cripple the insectoid forces, they would have to take out the hive ships. These massive vessels, each carrying millions of insectoid warriors, were the key to the insectoid strategy. Without them, the insectoids would lose their ability to coordinate effectively, and their war effort would falter. The plan was risky, and the odds were slim, but humanity had never been one to shy away from impossible challenges. Working with the Alani and Zenin, they devised a plan to infiltrate the insectoid fleet and strike at the heart of the hive ships. The Commonwealth had little faith in the plan. They saw it as reckless, a desperate gamble that would only lead to more casualties. But humanity pressed on, undeterred by the doubts of their allies. They knew that if they didn't take this risk, the insectoid empire would consume everything in its path, and there would be no future for humanity or any other species. As the human fleet prepared for the final assault, a quiet determination settled over them. They had faced impossible odds before, and they had always found a way to survive. Now, with the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance, they would do what they did best: defy the odds. The insectoids had underestimated humanity. Now they would pay the price. Into the hive, the human fleet stood poised at the edge of Commonwealth space, watching as the insectoid armada continued its merciless advance. Above them, the vast darkness of space stretched out endlessly, but it was now littered with the wreckage of battles long lost. Entire planets had been reduced to scorched husks. The insectoids showed no mercy in their conquest, and yet humanity had committed itself to stopping them. As the final details of the plan were laid out, Admiral Elena Ford stood on the command deck of the human flagship, Resolute. Her expression was calm but determined. She had studied the insectoid tactics, their relentless aggression, and their hive-mind coordination. What humanity lacked in firepower, they would make up for with strategy and ingenuity. "Admiral, all ships are in position," said Commander Zhao, her second-in-command, standing at her side. His voice was steady, though the tension in the air was palpable. "We're ready for your orders." Ford nodded, her gaze fixed on the holomap that displayed the insectoid fleet, a swarm of red dots moving across the galaxy like a tide of destruction. In the center of the enemy formation were the colossal hive ships, each bristling with firepower and protected by countless smaller vessels. "This is it," she said quietly. "We hit the hive ships, and we hit them hard. We take out their queens, and the rest of the swarm will fall apart." But the plan wasn't as simple as it sounded. The hive ships were the heart of the insectoid empire, and they were heavily guarded. To reach them, the human fleet would need to cut through waves of insectoid cruisers, destroyers, and fighters, all while dodging the powerful energy blasts from the hive ships themselves. It was a suicide mission for most, but humanity had little choice. "Begin the assault," Ford ordered. The human ships moved with precision, engines flaring as they surged toward the insectoid armada. The fleet was divided into several wings, each with a specific role in the attack. Some ships were dedicated to drawing fire away from the main assault force, acting as decoys to distract the insectoid cruisers. Others carried special payloads designed to pierce the Hive ship's heavy armor, an innovation developed by human engineers in record time. As the human ships closed in on the insectoid fleet, the blackness of space erupted into a chaotic swirl of energy blasts, missile trails, and debris. The insectoids responded with their typical efficiency, swarming toward the human vessels in perfect formation. The insectoid ships, sleek and predatory, moved as one, firing with terrifying accuracy. But the humans didn't flinch. They were used to fighting against the odds. "Decoy teams, engage," Ford shouted into her comm. Dozens of human frigates and destroyers broke off from the main formation, rushing headlong into the insectoid front lines. Their mission was simple: buy time. They dove into the heart of the swarm, firing everything they had, while drawing the insectoids away from the more vulnerable assault ships. It was a brutal tactic, one that would cost lives, but it was necessary. The first human ships to meet the insectoids were torn apart almost immediately. Shields crumpled, hulls exploded, and flames erupted from the wreckage. But each destroyed ship was replaced by another. Human pilots navigated with reckless abandon, using hit-and-run tactics that kept the insectoid fleet off balance. The insectoid ships, accustomed to more predictable combat patterns, struggled to adapt. Ford watched from the Resolute as the battle unfolded. Her heart ached for the losses her people were enduring, but she knew there was no other way. "They're holding," Commander Zeo said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Our decoys are drawing more fire than expected." "They're doing their job," Ford replied, her eyes fixed on the data streaming in. "Now it's our turn." Behind the decoy teams, the main assault force moved into position. These ships were larger and slower, but they carried the payloads that could crack open the Hive ships. Human engineers had developed a new type of warhead, one specifically designed to punch through the dense outer shells of the Hive ships. The only problem was getting close enough to deliver it. "Assault teams, you're up," Ford called out. "Remember, you only get one shot at this." The assault ships surged forward, dodging debris and weaving through the swarm of insectoid fighters. They had to get within range of the Hive ships, but that meant threading the needle through the deadliest part of the battle. As they approached, the insectoids began to shift their attention away from the decoy teams. The Hive ships, massive and menacing, unleashed a barrage of energy beams, slicing through the void toward the human assault ships. Several human vessels were vaporized in an instant, but the rest pressed on, dodging and weaving through the deadly fire. "Keep moving," shouted Captain Devereaux, one of the assault team leaders. His ship, the Valkyrie, was leading the charge. "We're almost in range." But the closer they got, the more intense the resistance became. Swarms of insectoid fighters swirled around them, trying to cut them off before they could reach their targets. Human gunners fired in all directions, but there were simply too many enemies. On the bridge of the Valkyrie, Devereaux gripped the armrests of his command chair as the ship rocked from the impact of enemy fire. His crew worked frantically to maintain their course, shields flickering as they absorbed hit after hit. "We've lost 2 ships in the assault wing," came the voice of Lieutenant Kova from the tactical station, "but we're still on course." "We've come this far," Devereaux muttered, staring ahead at the looming Hive ship. "We're not stopping now." Finally, the Valkyrie broke through the last line of insectoid defenses. They were within range of the Hive ship. "Fire the warheads," Devereaux ordered. The Valkyrie's missile bays opened, and the specially designed payloads launched, streaking through space toward the massive Hive ship. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down as the warheads approached their target. Then, with a blinding flash of light, the warheads detonated against the Hive ship's outer shell. There was a tense silence as the energy from the blast dissipated. For a moment, it seemed as though the attack had failed. The Hive ship remained intact, its massive bulk casting a shadow over the battlefield. But then a fracture appeared. It started small, a thin crack running along the surface of the hive ship's outer shell. But it quickly spread, splintering outward as the structure began to buckle under the pressure. "They've hit a critical point," Ford said, watching the data on the Resolute's command deck. "They're breaking." The fracture spread rapidly, and then with a deafening roar that echoed across the comm channels, the hive ship exploded. A massive fireball erupted from its core, sending debris flying in all directions. The insectoid fighters that had been swarming the human fleet faltered, their coordination breaking down as the hive mind lost its connection to the queen aboard the destroyed hive ship. The humans had done it. They had destroyed one of the insectoid queens. But the victory came at a heavy cost. Dozens of human ships had been lost in the assault, and countless lives had been sacrificed. The surviving human vessels limped away from the wreckage, their crews exhausted but triumphant. "We've taken down one," Commander Zeo said, his voice filled with cautious optimism. "But there are still more out there." Ford nodded, her expression grim. This was just the beginning. The insectoids won't stop until we've taken out all of their hive ships, and we've only just started. Despite the overwhelming odds, the humans had struck a critical blow against the insectoid empire. But the battle was far from over. The insectoids would regroup, and their retaliation would be swift and brutal. Humanity would need to be ready for the next phase of the war. For now, though, they had shown the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated. They had faced the insectoid threat head-on, and they had survived. And as long as there were still humans left to fight, the insectoids would never claim total victory. The fight for the galaxy had only just begun. The human fleet, battered and bruised, but still intact, limped through the void of space. The remains of the first hive ship drifted in the distance, a smoldering wreck surrounded by debris. The cost of the battle had been high, and the atmosphere on the human flagship, Resolute, was tense as the crew waited for their next orders. Despite their victory, everyone knew this was only the beginning. The insectoid empire had far more hive ships in reserve, and each one was a formidable threat. Admiral Elena Ford stood on the bridge, staring at the holomap. It displayed the position of their remaining ships, as well as the last known locations of the insectoid forces. She knew that the loss of one queen would only slow the enemy temporarily. If they didn't act quickly, the insectoids would regroup, and the human fleet would be swarmed before they had a chance to strike again. "We're on borrowed time," Ford muttered, turning to Commander Zeo. "We need to move before they can reorganize." Zao nodded, glancing at the casualty reports streaming in. "We lost nearly half our fleet in that engagement, Admiral. I don't know how much more we can take." "We don't have a choice," Ford replied, her tone hard but not unkind. "The moment we hesitate, they'll crush us." "Admiral," interrupted a voice from the sensor station. Lieutenant Hartman turned to face her, his face pale. "I'm detecting something unusual. A large energy reading on the edge of our long-range sensors. It's moving fast." Ford's eyes narrowed. "Put it on screen." The main view shifted, revealing a massive blip on the sensor display. It was far too large to be a normal ship, and it was heading straight toward them. "Is it another hive ship?" Jay asked, a trace of dread in his voice. Hartman shook his head, his hands flying across the controls. "No, sir. This is something else. I've never seen anything like it. It's emitting a massive amount of energy, far more than any of the hive ships we've encountered." Ford's gut twisted. She had a bad feeling about this. "How long until it reaches us?" "Less than an hour," Hartman replied. "At its current speed, we'll be in range in 40 minutes. Alert the fleet," Ford ordered. "Prepare for combat, but keep a safe distance. I want every available scanner on that thing. I need to know what we're dealing with." As the crew scrambled to comply, Ford turned back to the view of the incoming object. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was a trap, some kind of new insectoid weapon designed to wipe out the rest of the human fleet in one blow. But they couldn't run. They had to face it, whatever it was. "Commander Zhao," she said quietly, "if this is what I think it is, we're going to need every bit of ingenuity we've got." Zhao gave her a grim nod. "We'll be ready, Admiral." 40 minutes later, the unidentified object came into view. The human fleet had spread out, each ship taking a defensive position while the sensors scanned the incoming threat. The object was unlike anything they had ever seen. It was massive, larger than any Hive ship by an order of magnitude. Its surface was covered in strange, organic structures that pulsed with a sickly green light. Tendrils of energy snaked out from the core of the object, swirling around it like a living storm. The crew watched in stunned silence as it approached, its sheer size dwarfing even the largest human battleships. "What in the world is that?" Jay whispered, staring at the screen in disbelief. "I don't know," Ford replied, her voice tense. "But I'd wager it's insectoid." Hartman's voice came over the comms. "Admiral, the scans are coming in now. I'm not sure how to explain this, but it's alive." Ford turned sharply. "Alive? What do you mean?" "The entire structure," Hartman said, his voice shaky. "It's some kind of biological entity. It's emitting signals that are consistent with insectoid hive mind activity. I think it's a superorganism, a living hive." Ford's blood ran cold. The insectoid empire had always been terrifying in its coordination, with entire fleets acting as one through the hive mind of the queens. But this was something far worse. This was the hive itself, a living entity that could control entire swarms on its own. "Can we take it down?" Jay asked, his voice barely concealing his fear. Ford's mind raced. "I don't know, but we have to try." "Admiral," came another voice. This time, it was Captain Deveros of the Valkyrie, one of the surviving assault ships from the previous battle. "I've got an idea, but it's risky." "Go ahead, Captain," Ford said, eager for any edge they could gain. Deveros' voice crackled over the comms. "We've been analyzing the structure. If it's a living organism, it has to have a central nervous system, something that coordinates all of its actions, just like a brain. If we can find it and take it out, we might be able to disable the whole thing." Ford considered the plan. It was dangerous, but it was also their best shot. "How do we find this brain?" "Our scans are showing a cluster of high-energy readings near the center of the organism," Devereaux replied. "It's heavily protected, but if we can get close enough, we might be able to hit it with a concentrated strike. But getting in there, well, that's the tricky part. We'll need to punch through its defenses first," Jao said, studying the tactical displays. "That means drawing fire away from the assault team." Ford nodded. "All right. Here's the plan. We'll divide the fleet into two groups. One group will engage the organism's outer defenses, drawing its attention. The other group, led by the Valkyrie, will make a run for the core. We'll use everything we've got to clear a path." Zhao looked at her, his expression serious. "This could be our last shot, Admiral." "I know," Ford said quietly. "But if we don't stop this thing, there won't be anyone left to fight." She turned to the comms officer. "Send the orders. All ships, prepare for the assault." The battle began with a thunderous roar as the human fleet opened fire on the massive organism. Energy beams and missiles streaked through space, slamming into the creature's outer shell. The organism responded immediately, lashing out with its tendrils of energy, striking down human ships with terrifying precision. Entire cruisers were torn apart in seconds, their wreckage spinning off into the void. But the human ships pressed on, firing everything they had at the monstrous entity. The creature's defenses were formidable, but the humans had learned from their previous engagements. They moved with agility, dodging the organism's attacks and focusing their fire on weak points in its outer shell. Meanwhile, the Valkyrie and the assault team made their move. Under the cover of the main fleet's fire, they raced toward the center of the organism, weaving through the chaos as the creature's defenses tried to swat them away. Every second counted, and every hit they took brought them closer to destruction. "Captain, "We've lost 2 of our escort ships," shouted Lieutenant Kova from the tactical station. Devereaux gritted his teeth. "Keep going. We're almost there." The closer they got to the core, the more intense the resistance became. The organism seemed to sense their intentions, focusing its attacks on the assault team. Energy tendrils whipped through the air, smashing into the hulls of the human ships. The Valkyrie shuddered under the strain, its shields barely holding. "We've reached the core," Kova yelled. Devereaux stared at the massive structure before them. It pulsed with energy, a seething mass of organic matter surrounded by a protective shell. This was it, the brain of the organism. If they could destroy it, they could stop the entire thing. "Fire the warheads," Devereaux ordered. The Valkyrie's missile bays opened, launching a barrage of warheads toward the core. The missiles streaked through space, slamming into the protective shell. For a moment, it seemed as though the shell would hold, but then, with a blinding flash, the warheads detonated, piercing through the outer layer. The core shuddered, its energy pulsing erratically. The entire organism convulsed, its tendrils flailing wildly as it lost control. The human ships pulled back, watching as the massive creature began to break apart from within. "We did it," Devereaux whispered, staring at the collapsing structure. On the Resolute, Ford watched as the organism disintegrated, its pieces drifting apart in the vacuum of space. The battle was over, but the cost had been immense. Zhao exhaled slowly. "We've won, for now." Ford nodded, her expression grim. But this war is far from over. As the remnants of the human fleet regrouped, the surviving crews knew that they had faced one of the greatest threats the galaxy had ever known. But even with this victory, the insectoid empire was still out there, waiting to strike again. And humanity would be ready.